Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Jenny Mackay. I'm joined by my colleague Susan Sayre. We are both Digital Skills Development Officers, but we're also joined by Lynn Robertson, who is the Senior Education Officer, and we're all from Education Scotland. So Lynn, I don't know, do you want to say hi?
Yes, absolutely. Social studies is my area of responsibility, so it's absolutely brilliant to have this going ahead this afternoon, looking at mapping and digital. And thank you all for coming.
Brilliant, thank you, Lynn. So this afternoon, we plan on having a session that'll take about an hour, and we're going to be looking at mapping within the context of technologies and social studies. And we're going to focus on a product called ArcGIS, which uses GIS systems. So we'll talk about what that is, how you can use 3D maps and the built-in tools, how you can build up a whole sort of data set within it, and how you can use existing data sets to inform learning and teaching in your classroom, and then how you can save these from ArcGIS. And it's free for everybody, so there's no cost attached to anything we're showing you. We're also going to have a little look at some of the Google Earth tools. We're going to have a look at Earth. We'll talk about some of the packages that are in there, Street, Wonders of the World, etc. And we'll show you where to get additional support and help, where there's more professional learning if this is your area and you want to develop further. And so we'll take that forward. If that sounds suitable, I can't see the chat, but my colleague Susan is going to keep me informed. So if anybody has any questions as we're going through, if you pop them into the conversation space, Susan will keep me updated. And if there's anything specific you want us to cover, please let us know. So for national context, we have 4 documents that we've linked to for this session. So we've linked to the social studies curriculum that Lynn will talk about in a second, technologies that Susan and I use, how good is our school, and looking at what the expectation of digital use is around learning and teaching. And then I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about the last booklet, which some of you may have seen and some of you may not have. So we've got a book that our team have created, a guide on what digital learning might look like, which gives you examples rather than it being just the benchmarks. It gives it within the context of a learning environment, and it gives you examples of how you could apply those benchmarks and experiences and outcomes in a setting, and mappings in there from the early level. With that, I'm going to hand you over to Lynn. And Lynn, I don't know if you want to say anything around it.
Yes, absolutely. Mapping obviously features in the E's and O's, and I suppose 10 years ago, in fact longer than that, when the E's and O's were actually written, they were written very much with a physical OS map or Atlas map or whatever sitting in front of children. And I know my first experience of mapping was at SET, and that was a really long time ago, but it was in secondary school, and we were asked to find something on an OS map, and my lovely teacher at the time saw I was struggling and just very casually turned it round because I had it upside down. So I still went on to become a geography teacher, even with that in my background. So mapping is a really important skill, and it's something that sometimes children are a bit afraid of, using maps and how to use maps properly. And it's interesting because we're in a digital age now, and very rarely do children use a physical map in their life. And I kind of feel it's a bit like when people who are uninitiated like me say, when do I ever use geometry? I'm beginning to become concerned that children are going to say, when do we ever use maps? So it's really important, that kind of digital mapping, which is really becoming part of the world of work. From insurance companies who track vehicle users and the kind of risk that they take, to North Sea oil platforms, to all kinds of work which uses GIS. So I'm really delighted that Jenny is going to take you through ArcGIS this afternoon, because as well as my initial early problems with maps, my general issues with technology have never resolved themselves, and yet even I could use ArcGIS. And when I had my first demonstration of it, I absolutely loved it. So I really hope you enjoy the session this afternoon. And if you've ever any questions with social studies or anything you think I could help you with, please don't hesitate to get in touch.
Thank you, that's super. Yeah, we're really fortunate to have Lynn along for this session because, like she says, she is the senior Education Officer at Education Scotland for Social Studies, but she has that wealth of experience of being a geography teacher too, so I'm feeling the pressure a wee bit. So, with the technologies, experiences and outcomes, just like Lynn was saying there, we have a range of ways that digital tools for mapping and geography skills can be applied in the technologies. Everything from creating presentations using Google Earth, which is something that we'll cover later on, right through to finding reliable sources of information. And we're going to show you how you can get reliable information and import that onto a map to make it useful within the context of learning that you're carrying forward. So it's an alternative way from maybe the traditional things that we would look at. So if we're talking about presentations normally, we think about things like PowerPoint, maybe Sway, Google Slides, but this is a way that you can use mapping, developing that social studies side of things, but also developing the curriculum. And these are both of this slide and the last one are just a flavour of the E's and O's that they align to. And like I said, you may want to have a little look at that what digital learning might look like booklet. You can search on Twitter, if you're on Twitter, of the WDLMLL, that's not easy to say, and there's a scan in there. I'm going to show you this 1 minute video that kind of summarises what GIS is. So,
GIS stands for Geographic Information System. Using computer hardware, software, and a ton of raw data, we can explore the fundamental principle of geography, that location is important in people's lives. Using GIS, we can view, understand, question, visualize, and interpret data in visual ways that reveal relationships and patterns, which allows us to make better decisions. For example, a meteorologist might study the paths of hurricanes to predict where and when they might occur in the future. A city planner can choose the best location for a new park or hospital, ensuring that they are built in the place where they're needed the most. GIS is essential to understanding what has happened, what is happening, and what will happen in geographic space. Geographic understanding brings wisdom, and with wisdom, we can make better decisions to create a brighter future.
So that's just a really short video, but I think it's really nice one that you can show with younger learners to put into the context of why we might be using a mapping system. And GIS, as it said there, was just Geographic Information Systems. And these are maps that contain a huge array of information. So to break that down, we essentially have on a GIS map spatial data that relates to the exact location of an object on the map. And then we have attribute data. It's sometimes known, if you see American documents, sometimes they refer to it as tabular data as well. So the spatial data, if you look at it in a context of a school or a hospital, in this case we'll use hospital because I put the logo on there. We're going to think about hospital that we're trying to find on the map. The spatial data on that map tells us where that hospital is in relation to everything else on the map. The attribute data, when we click for more information, so maybe you've used that on Google Maps and you've clicked on a link, the little pin and it tells you information. It might tell you in a hospital about specialisms that it has, how many wards, staffing numbers, and we know that happens with schools, and we saw some examples. So that's basically the information that's in a GIS map, spatial and attribute. So to break it down, it's basically talking about where things are, the quantity of things, the density of the location, what might be inside it, finding the density and also map and change. And I really liked Historic Environmental Scotland describe GIS use as like the what, where, when, why. So if we think about literacy, a map tells the story of that area. And when we're going to talk about creating projects, I'll speak about linking it to literacy there, but essentially we are finding out about what's there, who might be there, why we might have something new there, and what it would be used for. So that what, where, when, why is really a nice flow into that. And then thinking, as Lynn spoke about, thinking about the industry, I was thinking from a classroom teacher point of view, how would I use this and link this up? So lots of us do World of Work Week and lots of different things like that. So GIS is informing lots of industries and areas. So we've got traditional things that it showed in those videos and that we've spoken about, such as city planning, healthcare, knowing when and if there's lots of accidents in an area or there's a high density of people, perhaps there's a hospital needed there or out of hours services needed, if there's policing needed. But it also covers things like agriculture, what kind of land is there, what is the crop reach, would it be suitable for different types of crops, down to tourism, transport links, and then through to things such as environmental agencies using GIS, so SEPA, looking at flooding alerts, which we see in the news more and more often, and that links into heritage, looking at World Heritage sites where, like up in Orkney, they would look at Scarpa Flow, and they would maybe have a look at, is there coastal erosion? So all of this data is in maps and is being used, and it's being moderated over time. It's also used in the one that we all are familiar with in navigation. As Lynn has said, many of us couldn't get very many places nowadays without a smart device of some description, but I still have my old OS maps in the car and still use them quite a lot. So, if we don't have any questions, we'll move over to a live demo. So, the first system that I'm going to show you is ArcGIS. So, it's just ARCGIS, and it's .com. You can see it up there at the top of my screen. So everything I'm showing you is completely free to use. I am signed in, you can see it over there, but you don't need to be signed in. Basically, when you go to ArcGIS, you'll see a tab at the top that says map, and that's what this is effectively doing. So there's a couple of things that we're going to go through. The reason I really like this, and I haven't used this in my classroom, but I think I could see how I would use it. I've used other mapping tools, I wasn't aware of this, but I would definitely use it. If we go into details, we've always got this handy guide. So if we think about learners in a blended model, this gives you a little guide that's available to you at all times. So if you click on details in the left-hand side, you can see that easily. Just like Google Maps and other mapping systems, OS maps, you can use your mouse to scroll around and you can see what's there. So the first thing is we're going to choose an address. Now normally we would probably get our young people to maybe put their home address in, or I'm not going to do that because I don't really want to put that on the internet or where I am, but I'm in Dundee, so I'm going to choose an art gallery that's near me in Dundee. So I'm going to just search for that. And you can see it's pulling me straight in. So I've first of all got this mapping system. I can see really clearly where things are. It can show me more results, and I've got the additional option to add map notes, and we'll come to that later. What you can also do is go to the left-hand side and choose different map options, and there's a lot more options here than are available in maybe other tools. So I can choose imagery, so I can see an overall picture, and I can talk to my class about what we might be seeing in the environment around the school. We can't go on school trips anymore so easily, certainly. So we could have a look at this and we could talk about what land usage is, and we can zoom right in. Oops, that's out. No plus and minus. We can zoom right in and we can do things like that. We can also start to plot routes, and again, I'll come on to that in just a little bit of time. What I do really like is in this you can have a hybrid. So this allows me to see the street overview as well as the visual. If I was looking at experiences and outcomes and I wanted to look at changing landscapes or topographs, I can change all of that. So if I think about Dundee has two large areas that are higher than the rest of it, although it's all quite slopey, but we have an extinct volcano. So I can see that using this map really clearly. I can look at what is on there, and I'm not letting my learners see any of the usage of the land, but they can look at the map and they can explore really clearly what is the different types of terrain, what might they be used for, what could they have been used for, and we can do some research around that. I can also switch out to ocean view, and I really like this. So up here in the search bar, I'm going to change to the Mariana Trench. So we're going to go out. So the Mariana Trench is the deepest trench in the oceans. And my class obviously can't go there, but we can look at the map, we can tour where it is, so we can zoom in and out and we can go locally. And then we can, oops, my mouse is having a little bit of a hissy fit. We can have a little look and we can find it on there, and we can see that we've got more results. But what I really liked is I can go in here and I can measure my map. So I can do a few different things. Oh, it's just not happening. So I can go up to the right hand side and I can use my measure tool. What we can do is we can measure the trench. So we can ask my young people to really quickly do some initial exploration with me where we plot it. And all I'm doing is I've gone to that box up in the corner. I've got the first tool you see there allows me to measure area, and we'll cover that in a second. The second one lets you measure length, and the third one gives you a specific location on the map, so the latitude and longitude. So I could go all the way around, and before we've even opened up Google or done any searches, we can talk about what does the land look like? How do we know it's a trench by looking at the land, the floor of the ocean? We can look at what might these lumps be. So there would be miniature volcanoes underneath. Would they be rock formations that are too small for breaking through the ocean floor? And we can have a look, but we can then find some core information before we've even gone near Google and done our normal traditional kind of map. So if I pop there, to close your measurement, you just click enter. So I've now got a measurement up there. It allows you to let go. You've therefore got an area that you can do. So you can do lots around scale with that. You can do a whole math lesson on different types of scale, but it's given you the area of the crater at the top of that volcano. One of the other things I might want to do though is I might want to pop in some information. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to modify my map and I'm going to add some information. So to do that, I'm going to click add and I'm going to add a layer. I'm going to add some notes first though. So we're going to give this the name Volcano Webinar. Great. So now I went to add in the left hand side of my screen. I selected add map notes and I get this pop-up window that allows me to populate a lot of information. So I would have taken a note of the area and I can use a range of stick pins or crosses and I can add in a stick pin to populate it. So I can put in some information. So, volcano. And this is the point where I would maybe get my young learners to start looking up some additional information. So the largest of 5. So I can get them to do some research, I can get them to pop some information in. I can also attach an image to this. So earlier on, I've gone and I've found some images, but again, thinking about mixing, joining up our experiences and outcomes, I've opened up Google Images, I've typed in the statement that I want to use there, and I'm going to use the Tools button to make sure that my young people understand a little bit about copyright, that they can't just take from anywhere on the internet. They have to use Creative Commons tools. And the Creative Commons images are photographs which have permissions for us to be using them on a range of different places. So we don't need to go to anybody to ask. We're not going to be in breach of copyright. So I can then scroll through here and I can get my young people to select the image that they want to use. So I'm going to choose this one. I'm going to go, when it pops open at the side here, the share button is the little 3 dots with the lines. Simply click it and it gives me the link, and I can go back into my map and paste in that URL. What I can also do is I can make that photograph be hyperlinked. So I might want them to find a reliable source. We always look at triangulation of data. Again, that's part of the technology of these knows. It's also good for them to look at different types of text. So we can get them to go onto the internet, check 3 sources. For this one, we're going to use National Geographic and About Hawaii Volcano National Parks. Yeah. I'm going to take the link from this page and I'm going to paste it into this box. That means that when they click the pin, the web page will open automatically. The information will still be there, as will my map. However, they're also able to open a new tab with this information to do some additional research. I can now close this box, or I can make a visual tile for it. So I can choose an icon for my pin to have. In this case, we're going to choose volcano. So we can select, there's a couple to choose from, but we're going to choose this one here. If I paste that in, All I do is click it to select it. I can change the size, the colour, and so on. And when I'm happy with my choice, I would simply click OK. Having the ability to change the size and colour also makes it increasingly accessible for learners who may have any visual impairments. When I feel I'm happy, I can click close, and you can see now on my map I've got an identifier. I can also, if I wanted to, map out, just as I did before, I'll just close, map out the area that covers it, and I can cover that in, and I can put in different information. I can put in an arrow, an additional, I can draw a line around to identify the crater top. The pin that I've just made, if I close all this over, I'll go to here, you can see I can choose in the details options as well as the about, which is the guides. I've got content that's showing me everything that I've got on my map. So we know that we already have the terrain, and now we've added our pin. If I get rid of that, it's away. So all I'm going to do now is if I click it, you'll see, oh, my photograph hasn't worked. But I've got the name of the volcano, I've got what should be an image there, but I think it's my internet connection. And if I click it, it takes me to that page. So again, my young people could be building up landmarks around Scotland, geographical fault lines, tectonic plates, could be doing a whole range of research all around that, and it's really that simple. So I'm going to change my base map back, and I'm going to go to world view. So we're going to zoom out. So just to give you a context of what that now looks like, I could be working on this, and I've now got this instant image that my young people can see. If I click home, it'll take me into a wider place, and I can scroll across all the way over here, and you can see how easy that would be, because there's nothing worse than having to stand up at the front of the class and having to move your pen around on the interactive board to get to the right location. These are really quick identifiers, and it's a nice way for your young people to be able to populate it, as well as for you to populate it with their information. Okay, so there's other ways that we can also add information on that. So you could use the measure tool that I showed you for measuring, comparing different lengths of a river. So you could look at the distance across a river versus the distance across different other locations. You could look at the land area of Iceland or Greenland, and you could then compare that to Australia and the land area across that. So there's lots of ways that you could use those measure tools in a flexible way. And again, the measurements can be changed to suit your needs. And also it's a nice way for you to be able to discuss with your class about scale and things like that.
Jenny, could we just have a wee chat about accounts? I've got a question about, do you need a username and password?
So to create an account, I had to give in, I did have to, for my teacher account, I had to give in my name, my username and an email. So when you're creating an account, if you did want to, we would always, with any product, suggest that you speak to your digital leads in your authority, or with the ISO, the Information Security Officer who looks after GDPR. All the stuff I'm showing you here, though, you don't need an account for it. If you want to create a class account, one of the pages that I've got set up to show you is this Esri page, and this shows you exactly like how to do all the things that you can do with a class account. So it talks about like how can you share with your students and things like that. So we will cover sharing your map, because you could put a map into, you can embed them, so you could have them in a Wakelet if you've got that, or a class blog or website. So there's lots of ways to share. But for your account, you do need to give over some details, yeah.
Mrs. Addison's asking, is it the public account option?
So you would need to, anytime you you would create a class account if you wanted to use it with your class. If you're just doing it, I created a private account, and then that means all my maps just belong to me. If I want to share them, so if I click save this map, or share it rather, oops, and I haven't saved it. If I save my map, save as, so if I go up here and I click save, I have to give it a title and I have to give it tags. So I'm going to tag it with volcano, and then I save it. You can see it saves to my account folder, so save map. That then means when I share it, I have to make my map public. but what I would say, like I was saying, I definitely would suggest that you don't create a class account without speaking to your local authority first. But like I said, there's no cost attached. So when you create your account, you're basically given the option, you click the box for everyone public, and then you're given the box for UK education, and then it allows you to select like all of the different maps that you want to share, and then you get a link. Within this map, what we can do is we can add a different layer onto it. So I have got my map. I'm going to go to add again, just where I added my notes to create my little pinpoint, and I'm going to add search for layers. So what this does is it lets me search layers I may have already created on my map, but I'm going to search on ArcGIS because they have a huge wealth of information available to you that they populate it from lots of locations. So Google Maps and ArcGIS, they share it. OIS, the Ordnance Survey map shared. So whenever you use a map, you'll see where the data is coming from in the bottom of the screen. And interestingly, if you look at Google Earth, you'll notice that they sometimes reference back and forth. So you can see what maps are being used. So on here, we're going to go volcano eruptions. So we'll just look up. So what we're looking for is we're going to find some data that we want. So we want to know where the world's volcanoes are. So I can select that, and then if I click the title of it, it gives me some information. So I could get my young people to have a look on, and it tells me really easily this data is going to show where they are in the world, and that allows them to go off and do more research on that and find out about the geographical lay of the land, what the land formation is like. So I'm going to add that to my map, as simple as that. And now we can see all these red dots appear. So now I know where all the maps in the world, all the volcanoes in the world are. What I'm going to also add is this map here, which says volcanoes eruption that have been observed. So I'm going to add that too. And instead of this time, because I've used this before, and I might, just like you would if you're doing your class lesson, you would prepare, I know that this has got data that I want to add in too. So I can just use that plus button rather than click on the title this time. So you can add by clicking the title for information or the plus and minus button. And again, if I didn't want that anymore, I just click minus and it goes away. I want to keep it on.
Just going to pause for a second just to make sure there's no questions. There was one question about data privacy impact assessments, but I said the local authority digital officer may be able to liaise with other LAs regarding this, so that would be useful.
Okay, no problem. So you can see in here, I've now got all of this data that's available to me, and it's showing, I'll zoom my map back in. It's showing me the location of volcanoes across the world, and then I can also see ones that have been seen to be observed. So I can see instantly, I can discuss, there's some volcanoes which have never been observed to erupt. So we can then talk about whether they would be Phanerozoic volcanoes, ones that haven't erupted for a huge amount of time and are deemed as extinct, or if they are ones that maybe are in remote locations. And again, we could do some information research around that. What I can also do with the data that's here is if I click on the little icons underneath in my menu bar, I can change how that data is shown on the map. So again, at the moment, I've got these all showing as dots, but I can choose to change my map to heat spots. So again, we can then link it to tectonic plate activity, and we can have all of those kinds of conversations really easily. And like, we've all probably spent time, all of us have spent time making like maps up and drawing things on, and this is there for you, and it's all so easy. Like, you can see I'm doing this in like 10 minutes. So I can choose whether I want a heat map, and I can choose whether I want which attribute. So that's where we come back to the two different types of attributes that the maps show, what attribute I want them to show. So I'm going to show that we want them to only show the location, but I could choose to have it by elevation. You'll also note that whenever I click on any of the data sets that I've added, a key will be available if I click on them. So I can see low activity, and then high activity gets the lighter the line will become. So we can see that in the North Pacific there's a lot of activity. So, really easy to import data sets. So I did that by add search for layers, and then all I did was search ArcGIS, and that's their own data. I can, however, add in data from living atlases. This is a really super system to be able to see like all of these like geographical changes that are live. What I would say, the last thing I'm going to show you is how you can import data from elsewhere. So, for example, Historic Environmental Scotland have a whole load of data sets available. You basically click it and it gives you the document that you need. But if your class have been doing research and perhaps they've gone off and they've been doing a study and they have looking at a focused area where they want to do some research or things like that, they might want to pull in specific data from a specific source. All the data could be added to an Excel, which again is another digital literacy tool, and what you can then do is export that Excel as a CSV file. So that's the important bit of this to remember. So you can add a layer of information from a file. It gives you some information about what kind of files you need, and when you're searching for the public data sets that are there, you've got a few different options to choose from. But I've already done this for us. So I went to the volcano, sticking with our volcanoes theme. I went on and looked up the data sets for eruptions in the last 30 days. I pulled it into an Excel and I've saved that as this CSV file. So now you can see here's my data set, volcanoes 30 days. I'm going to get it to show the magnitude of the eruption. I can choose how I want it to be displayed, by heat map again, by different coloured dots. I'm going to stick with just these big circles, and the magnitude and the key is identified at the bottom of my map. If you want to take a look at the website schools.esri.uk, and Esri is ESRI, you can see here there's lots of guides that we mentioned earlier, tutorials, how-tos and frequently asked questions. There's lots of information on there that will help you get started on using this for your own use with the class, or if you did look at a class account. But again, please don't do that without speaking to your local authority. Then there's lots and lots of guides, tutorials and information on there. They also have an amazing YouTube channel which I would highly recommend you take a look at, and we're going to show you where you can get certificated courses from Microsoft at the end of this session. These links. So there's lots of ways that you can tie it into a range of different subjects, and I'm going to show you how it links to science. So I know that this is social studies. But if I go up to ArcGIS when I'm in my maps, and again this doesn't need to be signed in, everything in this drop down menu when you're not signed in appears along the top of your screen. I just want to really quickly show you this scene, which is a bit like Google Earth, but if you're thinking about science, I was saying on the call earlier when we were prepping this with Lynn and Susan, we've all, if you're primary teacher and probably if you're secondary, we've all had that experience of trying to talk about orbits and axes of the Earth and the Sun, and we've had the tennis ball and the football, and we've had somebody with a torch and kids running around. So there's not really a great online tool that I was aware of that you could do. However, this is awesome. So if I zoom out a little bit, we've now got the Earth. I'm going to link home, and I'm hoping it'll find UK, and I'm just using my mouse to scroll around. I have two options when I've got my mouse. I can lock onto rotate, and I'm basically spinning the globe around, or I've got the grabber tool, in which case I can rotate the Earth. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to zoom out. So obviously a little bit like Google Earth, we've got layers, like we just spoke about, we've got base maps that we can change it to and so on, and we can look at, this one's really nice, so we can look at street lighting, so if we're looking at like impact and things like that, and we can zoom in at night. But the one underneath this, and this is the only bit of this I'm going to show you, is the daylight option. So if we go to today, so find today's date, October, and we'll go to yesterday. What I can do is I can enable shadows, and I can press play, and I can see the Earth and the Sun and the rotation. I can see it moving around, but to do the axis, you can also then see it waking up. If I was to change that back to maybe midsummer, so June, and I was to hit play again, you can see maybe not as much as I would hope. Let's see there. You'll see that eventually, once it starts to speed up, the Earth's axis rotates and so on. So it's a really nice tool to look at, like time zones, looking at the Earth. You can see it starts to spin up when it's not there, and I can spin the Earth around and we can have a look at, okay, what's happening, what would it be like in that country, and we can talk. So for early learners, because I used to be primary and the early years particularly, this would have been an amazing tool. Trying to teach an abstract concept like that to them is quite tricky. This would have been a really valuable tool.
Sorry, just Lynn here to say that even if what you're thinking of doing is not quite as in-depth as that, one of the things you can do really easily with it, if you have it on your board in the morning, you can measure from your school to any place the kids have seen in the news, or any place, and you can look at the curvature of the Earth and the distance, if it was the Earth was flat, and the distance around the curvature of the Earth, just as a starter in the morning. If you're doing something to do with any place, you can find it really easily on ArcGIS, and you can show them literally 2 or 3 minutes to find the place and the distance, and it's really good for spatial awareness. Thanks, Penny.
No, not at all. That's a great top tip. It links to so many different things and topographical subjects, and yeah, it's brilliant. So we're really, really quickly going to have a little look more at Google Earth and Google Maps. So Google have termed the use of mapping skills as geoliteracy. So it's essentially everything that we've already spoken about, but they've branded it under geoliteracy, and they're talking about the interactions that come when we're looking at mapping, and we're talking about geographic understanding, interconnections between the use of space and how we interact with it, and the implications that it might have. So when we're changing landscapes and we're looking at any changes that have taken place. So Google tools that they have available are these set of 8. Some of them are in development, so are not publicly available unless you register for them. So things like Earth Studio, that's still under development, but it's just to flag them up. We're really only going to focus on time-lapse, Earth Engine, and also Google Earth. And I'll talk a little bit about Street View as well. Okay, no problem. So Google Earth can support geoliteracy through a range of things, and there's another webinar on next week where we're looking at using artifacts and historical aspects around this. But there's a lot of built-in tools for exploring art, architecture and language through maps through Google. They've also got, as we've looked at their data maps, and I'll show you some of them in just a second. And again, they can look at bird's eye view. So again, locations we may not be able to travel to necessarily for a multitude of reasons, as well as built-in quizzes. So when we're thinking about how can we extend activities beyond the classroom, these are really nice ones to make sure that young people are engaging with maps, developing that interest and that passion around.
So here is Google Earth Engine, as you saw in the 4 clips in the PowerPoint. As you can see here, there's a wide range to choose from, ranging from the glacier retreat and the impact of global climate change, right through to the one that we're looking at just now is this deforestation one. So we can see here, we've got it scrolls through the timeline for us. We can pause it and go back in chunks, and we can change the speed. But again, it allows our young people to see when there's been what the change has been over time, but also was it worse in certain periods, and look at the environmental causes that could have been a contributing factor, and so on. There's a wide range in there through from, as I've shown you, the deforestation one, right up to the glacier retreat. But there's also things like expansion and development. So here, this one shows you Dubai. And due to the huge increase in tourism that's there, the developments that have taken place around the coastal edge, where essentially a whole area has been built up for people to visit. So again, young people can see that over time. We can look at what caused that change, so increased transportation, reduced cost of transportation, and so on. So if you've not explored it, I would really recommend the time lapse feature within Google Earth Engine. Additionally, we're going to show you some of the features that are in Google Earth. So we know many of you will have been using Google Earth probably for a considerable amount of time, either for your own use or with use with your class. Down in the bottom right hand corner, we've got a range of different tools. We can zoom into our exact location if you've given it rights to see where you are. We can also change into street view, so we're allowed to walk about in environments which might be really remote to us, and it allows us to get a better understanding of the cultures that and what a location may look like. And increasingly these are also available where you can go into a location, for example, a museum, and we're going to talk about that in a different webinar, so check out Did You Learn Scott for that session. You can change from 2D to 3D, so again buildings appear larger, so it's almost as if you're walking right through it, and it changes the perspective of the map, and you can reposition yourself so that you're facing the right way and you know which way is north, etc. However, at the other side of my screen, at the left hand side, I've got a range of different tools. So obviously we've got first and foremost the search bar. So this allows us to look at things which they feel like you might want to take a little look at. They're going to support some of the tours that they've maybe created, and they allow you to get straight in there and have a look. You can also use that search bar to search for tours. Or you can just search for a specific location. So search for a specific location. And depending on your broadband speed, it will zoom right in. It will automatically give you an information card, which you can send to other people. But you also get this add to project button, and we're going to come back to projects. But your young people can create a virtual tour within Google Earth. So this is really nice way to build on their presentation skills, move away from maybe standard presentations that are non-digital or that might be more traditional using things like PowerPoint, and introduce a new way for them to present information to the class, giving people a live tour. If we wanted to add Edinburgh Castle to a tour, so maybe we were going to create a project that was going to be a presentation on castles in Scotland, we could simply click Add Project and we would give it a title. We don't have a project yet, so we're going to create a new one. So we're going to say Add New Project. And we're going to give it a title, so we're going to go Scottish Castles. And we can save. So we can now see at the side, this pop-up button will, pop-up box will already open. We can get rid of it by using the back button. But in here, this little pin on the square is our project pages, and we can now see here all the castles that we have listed. At any time when you're using any of these Google products, they have these really handy built-in tutorials that'll just play and let you then continue. So again, if you're maybe less familiar with the software, you've got that option available to you. So again, we could come back and we could simply get rid of that, and we could go back into my search button, and this time I'm going to look at Scottish castles. So I'm throwing the net quite wide for it. So what Google Earth will do is then select castles it thinks are in the area where I'm based, so I am in the east coast of Scotland, and it will let me see castles that are in the vicinity. So I can then have done a wee pre-test with this, and I might have cards issued that I want my young people to do it. I might allocate them like letters of the alphabet that I want them to find castles that relate to those specific letters of the alphabet, and they can go off and find out information. So for example, if I go to Glamis Castle, Google Earth will zoom in for me. I can add this when it stops spinning, so I can add it to my project. Again, I get that pop-up button. I'm going to confirm that it is that project, but I could have multiples, and I can save it. I can also edit it, so I could do that from that pop-up button, but if I go over here, I'm in my projects page, and I select Glamis Castle, for example, and I use the edit pencil button, I can do a range of other things. So I can replace it with my own information. So I can just click replace and retype information there. I can give it additional information. I can change the pin that lets people see, and I can also change the size of the pin. So if I've maybe got learners with a visual impairment, they might need a larger icon or one that has slightly different colour schemes to make it stand out a bit more. Or even if I've got younger learners and maybe their fine motor skills are still developing, so we might want larger icons that they're going to use this project with. So I can choose this castle icon for a historic building, and I can, again, as I just mentioned, change the colour. So we'll make it red to stand out. So I've now got that. So again, if I was building up a range of historical buildings, I could colour code them based on what they are. So if it's a monument, I could do one icon or one colour. If it's a castle, another colour, and so on. So again, I'm introducing that concept of keys and things like that with my young people without it being on a traditional style of map. I can also do a few other things. So if I go up to here to replace, I can not only change the title and the text that I want people to know about, I can put a link in. So if I've made a sway about that castle, for example, or if I've found a website that I want my young people to visit, if they're using this as a learning tool, I could put that link in there. I could also have got them to maybe create their own models of it or take their own photographs and populate it with a photograph that acts as a trigger when it opens. Just as you're seeing here in this video guide, we could have an alternative one that would be applicable for our Glams castle. So really, really straightforward. Additionally, within that, I've also got some measure tools. So again, I could measure the estate of Glams castle. So just to give you a little example, we could measure the driveway, and we can just basically click the dots, drag the line, and so on. If we're measuring a straight line, it'll just measure the total between all the dots. If we go back and we join up any of our dots, so for example, if we were looking at the area of football pitches, or we were looking at the area that our school landscape would be, it will also, if I join up the corner points, it will let me see not only the perimeter, but it'll let me see the area, as you can see there. And what that means is I could give my class a research project to go and see which is bigger, which has the longest perimeter, and what is their area, and they can simply copy these pieces of information straight into whatever type of document they are creating. Again, in here I can change my map style, so I can have it really clean, as it says there. I can have exploration, or I can have one that has everything in it. Now, bear in mind, Google Maps does contain everything, so it will flag up labels of maybe restaurants and things like that. So I would tend to probably stick with the exploration one, but you may want, if you've got more senior pupils, to have everything, or it to be really clean for your young people, and maybe just have that top one. One of the other two tools that I'm going to show you in Google Earth are I'm Feeling Lucky. So that's this little dice. So if I select that, get rid of this, what it'll do is it'll select somewhere for me, and it'll ask me to find out information. So if you wanted your young people to learn a little bit about maybe doing research and doing copyright, and you want them to create, they could use this I'm Feeling Lucky, which will basically take them on a tour of some place around the world. It'll give them a location, and you can ask them to create a report on it or a sway, developing their digital literacy skills, but also increasing their understanding that they can't just take for granted what they're seeing via Google search or via any online search, that they should check their data, the copywriting awareness, so making sure that they're aware that they can't just take any image from the internet to include in their presentation, and so on. So the I'm Feeling Lucky tour will basically take you anywhere, drops you somewhere you may never even have heard of, and it allows you to do a little bit of research. One of the other tools we'd like to show you is Voyager, and this is the last one we'll probably show you within Google Maps, Google Earth. So within Voyager, when you select that from the menu at the side, you have a range of different activities. So again, with anything online, we would always recommend that you test it out first, that you check it's age and stage appropriate, and you use your professional judgment. But there's a whole range of games. So there's ones that you saw there that are bird sounds and or animal sound, match them up. There's games where you can do archaeology sites, musical instrument quizzes. So you hear a sound and you have to match it up to the musical instrument. It gives you some information about where that instrument is from, etc. So the games ones are really useful and really interesting. They might be a nice add-on to a lesson that you're doing. But again, like we say, please double check that they are suitable for the age and stage that you're doing and the content is appropriate. There's also a range of layers that you can add onto your Google Earth map. So a little bit like I was showing you in some of the presentation slides, you can have a look at the imagery that's there. So again, fields to let people see the range of use of the landscape in their area, glacial changes. They're also prominent in here, and as you can see tsunamis and the whole global earth view, and there's these really cool hurricanes ones. There's also volcanoes, and there's a wide range of maps that are in there too. A lot of the maps are based in America though, so just to be aware of that. You can link out to Street View from here, and then the last three are the three that we probably want to highlight a little bit more. So culture allows you to see where there are UNESCO World Heritage Sites, for example, amazing innovative architecture, different locations and celebrations taking place all around the world. There's also one from St Kilda's, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site in Scotland, and there's a whole range of other things in there. So what that does is essentially you would select the one that you want to go to, and it takes you on a little tour. So this one will let me do, this one, if I select food from around the world, it'll allow me to start exploring, gives me some information, and then it takes me to different places around the world and gives me information about what happens there at Christmas and what is eaten. So it's a really nice way to introduce young people to using this tool. There's also the travel ones, which again are very similar, but there's a whole range of activities that you can do with these. So you can take a tour of specific locations, and these are already created and being guided for you. And lastly, in the education bubble, they've linked to a range of different curricular areas. So it might be that they've highlighted how it would link over with science, how it's linked to social studies, how it's linked to math, you saw up there with the Eiffel Tower, and so on. So if you haven't had a look, I know that's a really fast overview of just those Voyager tools, but this little add-on to our GIS session was just to highlight that these tools are there, and if you haven't explored them, maybe take a little time if you haven't, and I know things are very busy just now, but if you get the opportunity, have a little chance to have a look. Just to refresh our memory of where we can get all of our help and support, there is the professional learning communities and the National Glow site, so that's the flag icon at the bottom on the left hand side, and then the tile you're looking for is highlighted there with the arrow. Within the professional learning communities from Education Scotland, we have a range of different ones available for you. So there is the social studies one, which can be accessed through scanning that QR code, or the PDF of this is hyperlinked. There's lots of resources available there. We also have the professional learning community within technologies, so the National Technologies community, again with lots of resources and links, and you can either click the link in the PowerPoint that's in the shared space or scan that code. We would always highlight DigiLearn Scot. There's lots of learning pathways on there. Our colleagues have also done a webinar specifically on Google Maps and Google Earth, so you may also want to check that out, and you can access those through the webinar tab. That takes you to our YouTube channel, so previous webinars. You can also access our YouTube channel and Twitter feeds directly from that site too. As I mentioned earlier, schools.esri.uk.com is the place to go to find out a little bit more about using GIS within your teaching and your class. As we've already said repeatedly, please make sure that you speak to your schools or local authority's information security officer or digital leads team before you register your class for anything. So where do you get some additional support and where are there online? Microsoft Educator Centre has a range of courses which may be of interest, and most of which are either badged or certificated. So for the ArcGIS one, we have getting started in 3D maps. It's very similar to the session that we've done today, but you can go through that yourself and get that badge and certificate. And there's also a little bit more on maps and data, and that's a separate course. So again, they're free to take part in. You would register with your Glow username and address, and you can just go through that range of professional development. Esri has a wide range of resources that are really useful and interesting that I found useful when I was creating this course, so you may want to take a little look at that. They're all hyperlinked again. And Google Earth has a huge range of resources too. So again, there's that session on Carmen Sandiego I was telling you about. It gives you a little bit of background information, how to create your own Earth stories, and so on. So, just a quick review. We've looked at mapping within social studies and technologies curriculum. We've talked about what GIS is and how ArcGIS can support learning and teaching. We've had a discussion and looked at navigating 3D maps using built-in tools to develop your own pedagogy and how that could look within your classroom. And we've also covered briefly how to save and share your maps from ArcGIS. We've talked a little bit about Google Tools, and we've had a very quick overview of Google Earth, Google Streets, Wonders of the World, and those tools that are in the Voyager section. Finally, we have looked at what your next steps may want to be, or you may want your next steps to be, and where you can go if you do want to take those next steps in getting further support and professional learning. That just leaves me to say thank you very much. Susan and I can be accessed on DigiLearn Scott's Twitter feed. If you've got any comments or you'd like to let us know how you're using these tools, we'd love to hear from you. And Lynn's Twitter feed is there, Robinson Lynn. So I'm sure we can speak for Lynn and say that she would really welcome hearing from you all as well and how you're using these tools. We'd love to know. Thank you all for your time and have a lovely evening.